Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with your host, Rosie Gilmoss, and joining me from not that far away from me, actually, is Jen Plant. Hello, Jen.
Hello, good to see you.
And to see you. It was quite funny. I noticed when your form came in that you lived at the time in the same town as me. And I messaged you and said, I know you're not in for ages, but I've just realised we live locally. How weird. And what was it you said to me, Jen?
Oh, well, I thought you lived in Cornwall. I thought you were of a type. I thought you would be wearing a stripy beret on top and have children on the beach. I don't know why.
It has been known because I did used to live near Whitstable. So
Right,
I have fitted that stereotype sometimes, but I tried very hard to find a Breton stripe top that I could fit into
I'm disappointed.
today.
I'm disappointed.
So you got lime green instead. So, Jen, I have had a little chat with you off Mike just to talk about Mike, your late husband. Now, he died fairly recently. It's last November.
Yeah.
And I said to you, oh gosh, that's pretty recent then. You must still be reeling. And you sort of went, sort of. So it was, and then I remembered from your notes that you were about to separate. So this is going to add a very different dynamic to the story, which is, I'm really interested to hear. Because, I mean, by the time you go out, you'll probably be coming towards episode 80. But every single story is different, and I'm genuinely fascinated. So, I mean, where would you like to start? Do you want to start your love story and go from there, or?
Yeah. So I met Mike when I was 19, but I was a very grown-up 19-year-old. I had I worked in London. I had my own flat, and I met him in a nightclub in Brixton, where all great love stories begin.
Of course.
And he was 28. And I was absolutely besotted with him. I thought he was just the sexiest, most exciting man I'd ever met. I think because I'm from a very small town in Kent and he was from London. He was a London man. And I was like, oh, it's very exciting. Yeah. And his friends were all very exciting. And I'm from a place and a kind of generation where there aren't drugs and people are terrified of them. And him and his mates would like take drugs and go clubbing. And I was like, wow, what a guy.
The glamour, right?
Yeah, the glamour of it. And he also, he had a really good job in London. And I did too, I hasten to add. But the boyfriend I'd had before him was a waiter in a restaurant. And the boyfriend I'd had before that was a student. So it was like this grown-up man. I was very kind of infatuated by him. And I think we got engaged when I was 20. And I asked him to marry me.
How modern.
Because I was just like, I just love him. I just want to marry him. I want to be with him all the time. And I kind of wanted to lock it down. And we bought our first house when I was 21. And we got married when I was 22. And we just had, I would say, like, I just thought he was the best. I really did. And we had he had 2 children who, when we met, they were 7 and 11, and they're now both in their 30s, which is insane. And we had them every other weekend, and he lost his father had died when he was very, very small of a heart attack, and his mum was quite elderly. We looked after his mum. His mum died. We tried to have a baby for about 7 years before we did. So we had 3 miscarriages. So we went through like sad things, things happened. But we were really good at kind of sticking together. And that was really great. And then I'd say just after, during lockdown, we had an incredible time. Like, we always laugh about the fact that, for a lot of people, and I know for you as well, COVID times were awful, but we had the best COVID times. We just holed up, me and my husband and my son. He was about sort of 10, 11 at the time. And we just had great times. We were really happy when it was the 3 of us.
It's funny you say that, because John and I said, because obviously, COVID was a bit shit for us, but we both said, but if he hadn't caught it, we'd have just had the time of our lives, because we were just getting together. We were madly in love. we had a big garden. We were like it would have been awesome in a way, but then it obviously wasn't. So
No, but we kind of had that, like the first lockdown when the weather was incredible. We had this lovely big garden. We lived like in the middle of woods. It was incredible. We'd go for our walks every day, and we actually lived somewhere it was nice to go walking. We would work all day, and then we'd get to like 5:30, and Mike would go, right, cocktail hour, and we bought all these unusual spirits, and he'd make an exciting cocktail. We had a hot tub in the back garden, and then me, Mike, and our son Reg, we'd go and sit in the hot tub, and we'd just honestly, it was like brilliant. And then the second lockdown, the Christmassy one, was even better because we're like, well, it's winter, and we kind of just holed up. And I decorated the house for Christmas at the beginning of November because I was
same.
like, why not? Let's just make it Christmas.
Do you know what? The lights I put up in the dining room are still there because they just look, honestly, because I just loved it so much, and it cheered up the house so much. And my house is quite old, so the middle of it's quite dark. And I just think they just remind me of putting up decorations in November. And I'm one of those people that's like, no, 1st of December, but it was so miserable. I just thought, let's just decorate.
But we loved it, and when he went, what happened was, I'm a deputy head of a secondary school, so I only worked from home until schools were open, and I went back to work. I think it was like the March, and Reg went back to school, and Mike carried on working from home really from then on in, and he got lonelier and lonelier and sadder and sadder, and I think it made him. I don't know. I think he started to really resent the fact I got to go somewhere every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I started to resent the fact he didn't have to go somewhere every day. And I think that, and I worked quite a long way from where we lived at the time. So I had like an hour's drive to work, hour's drive back. And the rest of the year kind of carried on fairly uneventfully, but it was just quite hard. And then in the January, January last year, 2022.
I had to think about
I had to really think then. It's dreadful. My best friend died in a car accident.
Oh gosh.
And she was the love of my life. She was like my best friend since we were wee. And
that's made me go really cold.
Oh, it was
I'm
awful.
so
And
sorry.
it was terrible. And one of the things that happened was that I was at work. So my best friend's dad, and like I said, I can't stress enough how close we were. She was literally my other half. You know, when people talk about having another half, it was her. And my husband had always known that he would play second fiddle to the fact that we were the great love story, and things. You know, she was my person. And I was at work, and and her dad phoned Mike at about 11 o'clock. She died at about 10 o'clock. And he phoned her at about 11 o'clock and said she'd died. And I did the rest of the day at work. And then I met my friend Leanne for a drink after work. And I didn't get home until about 8:30. And then Mike told me. And I just felt like my best friend had been dead all day. And I didn't know. Everyone else knew. And he was kind of like, well, it's been really hard for me because I've not known what to do. And I was like, I really struggled with it. And it left me with a bit of a sense of, she was my age. I was 41 at the time. And I just thought, oh God, you can just go. Like, you can just go. You can just die. And I think I resented Mike a little bit that he hadn't told me about it. I think I realised that was the saddest I could ever be. And I think it made me think about what I wanted from the rest of my life. A bit. I think I thought to myself, like, you know, if I had a limited time left, am I happy with the life that I've got?
Yeah.
And then we were kind of rubbing along quite nicely. But there was just something missing between the two of us, and he knew it as well. I started going to see a grief counsellor because of the fact that Amy had died. And we ended up talking a lot about my marriage. We ended up talking a lot about the fact that the fact that I didn't really feel connected to Mike anymore. But I used to say, the thing is, though, he's a really good husband. He's a really good dad. So that was kind of my line. And then last year, we had this awful argument, really, really awful argument. It was the October half term, so it was about this time last year. And I was definitely spending more and more time with my friends. I was definitely spending more time out the house. I definitely was working later than I needed to, because when I came home, I just found it a bit depressing and a bit like of a struggle, and everything I did kind of was wrong. And we had this horrible argument, and he said in this argument, like, well, I'm going to leave you, or I'm going to kill myself because I can't be done with this anymore.
Wow,
Like,
that's a pretty hefty
and I was like,
choice.
Jesus Christ, this is like, where has this come from? And he was like, I can't do it anymore. And I was like, well, look, perhaps we should split up, but we should have a conversation about it. We should be sensible about it. And he was kind of, well, you'll have to move out because I want to stay in our house with Reg. And I was like, well, okay, but I don't know how I'll do that. So you've got to give me a bit of time. And then we'd have moments like that. And then we'd have moments where it would be back to normal and everything would be fine. And so it was a weird one, because on the one hand, I'd be like, this is really difficult. And then on the other hand, I'd think, oh, but you're a nice man and you're a good dad. And by this point, I've been married to him longer than I haven't been in my life. So my entire adulthood has been living with this man who sort of looked after things. And so I was just I didn't know what to do. And I remember having this really big cry in the October half term. Mike had COVID, and we'd both got COVID when we'd gone on a holiday, and he was just in bed. And I was downstairs in the kitchen, and I completely sobbed my heart out, because I was like, I looked at this lovely big house, this lovely big kitchen, and I was stood like on the by the kitchen island, just thinking, like, I'm not going to have this life this time next year. This is all coming to an end, and I can feel it all coming to an end. And then it was on the 20th of November, and I went to a baby shower. And I don't normally go to baby showers because I disagree with them. I think they're awful.
Right.
Just
especially for subsequent children.
Well,
like,
yes.
One is okay, I'll tolerate it, but after that,
even then, I'm like, don't tell the devil too much. Baby's not born yet. Let's celebrate when it stands up. I always found it weird. It was a very, very close friend of mine, and
we'll make an exception then.
Oh, and she had been trying for a baby for years, and she'd had miscarriages. And I was like, oh, do you know what? Fine. So I went to this baby shower. I was going to meet my friend for brunch first, because she didn't want to go either. So we were going to go and have a meet to be like, oh my God, baby shower, yeah. And I left, and I gave Mike a kiss, and he was like, oh, I'll see you in a bit. And he sort of said, what time will you be back? And I said to him, and he said, and he always used to make like a joke about me having a fancy man. He'd be like, oh, I expect your fancy man will be there. And I was like, I'm just going to a baby shower. But he'd started to get quite paranoid because he was indoors and I was out.
Yeah.
And I said, no, like, it's a baby shower, no fancy men, blah, blah, blah. So off I went.
Not something known for men.
Not sexy occasion.
Not really.
No. And so we went, and I left Mike at home with Reg, and I said, that's my son, and I said, what are you and Reg going to do? And he was like, oh, I don't know, I might take him for a bike ride. I was like, oh, that'll be nice. But I thought to myself, he's not going to take him for a bike ride, because he's just going to sit in his pajamas and wallow about the fact that I'm not at home, or he'll work or whatever. And I went to the baby shower, and I was gone. I left at about 11. I got back about 5:30. And weirdly for me, particularly because of what happened to Amy and her passing away suddenly, and also when I was a kid, my sister died suddenly as well. Yeah, she got hit by a car. I mean, genuinely, don't be friends with me. I am unlucky.
Yeah, you're going to get a reputation. You know this.
Yes. I know. I did think that. It's good they're all different circumstances, and often I'm not there. Otherwise,
well, I was going to say yes. Where were you during?
Yeah, exactly. So I normally phone, and I normally go or a text and say, is everything okay? But I didn't. I'd sort of had quite a nice time with my friends, and in the car on the way home, I was voice noting my friends that I'd been with at this baby shower, and we were kind of talking about baby shower, and there were some photographs, and I looked really awful in them. And I was going, why do I look fat in those pictures? I'm not fat. And that just back and forth. So all I'd done was text and said, on my way home. I hadn't said, is everything okay? I wasn't expecting a reply. I hadn't phoned. And I got home, and the house was really dark because obviously it was like this time of year. So, and I thought, that's weird that there's no lights on downstairs. So I came in, switched the lights on, and my son was in his playroom, which was downstairs. And he's a 13-year-old boy, so he's just on his gaming thing.
I was going to say, just thumbs
Yeah,
working.
just plugged in. And I said, oh, hiya. And he was like, hi, mummy. And he came out and he gave me a hug. And I walked into the kitchen and I saw our box of, like HelloFresh.
Yeah.
Like meal kit things. And I saw that was on the breakfast bar. And it was just sat there. And I thought, oh, he's not unpacked that. That's weird. And I went upstairs to our bedroom because I was going, Mike, and I couldn't find him. And I went upstairs to our bedroom, and our bedroom was like I said, it was quite a fancy house. And our bedroom had like its own kind of hallway. So there was a door to a hallway, then it was its own bathroom and a dressing room. Then there was kind of a partition wall, and then there was our bedroom beyond that. So when you walked in, all you could see was the kind of partition wall, not through to the bedroom. And I went to open the door, and it was locked. And I thought, oh, he's annoyed with me. Like he's absolutely got the piss with me. And Reg was behind me, and he was going, that's weird. And I was banging on the door going, Mike, can you just open the door? Nothing. So then it was one of those like silly interior locks, and we'd only put a lock on the door for, wanting to do sexy time and suddenly having...
Do you know, I was going to say, we have a internal lock, little hook lock for exactly this.
Exactly the reason, because you don't need a small person being like, good morning.
Traumatise anyone.
And actually, regardless of how good or bad things ever were with Mike and I, we always did lots of the sexy time. That was always like our thing. Like even if things were awful, it was like, well, may as well, as we're both. So I got a knife, you can just get a knife. And so I undid it, and I walked in and I looked at the bed, and I assumed he'd just be in bed having a grump about something. And I looked on the bed, and he wasn't on the bed. And I thought, oh, he's not in here. And I was just about to turn around, and at the corner of my eye, I saw him lying on the floor, and he was like face down on the floor like that. I'm sorry, this is a podcast. Imagine if you
we do
will,
put
man,
video out as well, so still imagine.
So he was kind of flat on the floor, face down, and I looked at his arms, and his arms were kind of mottled and blue, and I thought, oh, he's dead. He's definitely dead. And then Reg came up behind me, and I really didn't want him to see. So I kind of whizzed around and said, oh, Reg, Daddy's not very well. We're going to have to call an ambulance. And he went, okay, ambulance, 999. Yes, okay, 999. And I went, right, brilliant. You go downstairs. You look out of your playroom window, because you'll be able to tell me when it's here. Because I thought, I don't want him.
Give him a job.
You have a job, and don't look at this. And then I got closer to Mike, and I felt his back, and his back was warm. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe he's not dead, because I'd kind of just made that assumption. And I was thinking, oh my God, like what, I don't know what to do. So I phoned the ambulance. And then this is the bit that kills me. Phone 999. And I'm on hold. And they're like, sorry, we've got call volumes at the moment are incredible. And, blah, blah, blah. And I was just on hold listening to like a hold tone. And I was probably only on hold for about 45 seconds, but I was standing in my bedroom just thinking, how the fuck am I on hold? Like, how is that a thing? Like, this is a proper emergency. This isn't, So got through, and I said, right, I think my husband's had a heart attack, because in my head, that was the only thing it could possibly be, because his dad died of a heart attack. He was very stressed. He was quite overweight. It always used to be a thing where I'd say to him, you're going to have a heart attack if you don't calm down in a minute. So I just thought, okay, this is what's happening. And the ambulance people said, okay, well, what we need you to do is turn him over. And because he was kind of wedged between our bed and the wall, and because he probably weighed almost double what I do, I literally couldn't lift him. Like I couldn't lift him at all. And I was saying, well, I can't. And they were like, well, you need to try. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I can't move him. So they said, well, go and get a neighbour. So I came running downstairs and went outside, went to my neighbours next door, Bill and Jane, knocked on the door and said, Mike's had a heart attack. Can you come and help me? And Bill from next door came running in, and he like turned him over. And when he turned him over, I saw that his lips were completely black, like completely black.
Oh my God.
And I also saw that his glasses were kind of smashed on his face, like he'd stood up and just fallen down, like hadn't put his arms out or anything.
Yeah.
And I think I've always thought of heart attacks as being those things where someone suddenly clutches their chest and then they stagger for a bit. But he had just gone bang. Like you could tell, like his face was kind of almost bruised, I suppose. His glasses were smashed. Like I say, his lips were blue. And so then my neighbour is being spoken to by the ambulance people and he's doing CPR. And I just walked downstairs. I just kind of left my neighbour and his wife in my bedroom. And I walked downstairs and I walked into the playroom and I said to Reg, I think Daddy's died. Because I thought, what is the point of there being this hoopla? And then hours later, and I think I thought about the whole thing with Amy and the fact that Amy had died and no one told me. And I thought, if I know this information, I've got to tell him. Like that's I've got to tell the truth. So I said, I don't know, but I think Daddy's died. And Reg went, okay. And then he said, Mummy, I can't feel my face. And I said, no, yeah, I know. Like, I'm sort of like, I know. And I gave him a hug. And then he said, well, what do we do? And I said, well, we have to wait because the ambulance people have to come and they have to try and make it better. I just don't think they will. Then the ambulance people turned up and they sent 2 ambulances. So it's a little bit sublime to ridiculous. No ambulances, 2 ambulances.
Like buses.
Like, very much like buses, like really sad buses. And they turned up and they were kind of upstairs for ages. In the meantime, I'd text my friend Eleanor and I'd messaged her and said, can you come over? Mike's had a heart attack. And I'd text my friend Andy and said, Mike's had a heart attack. I don't know what to do. Because they're the friends that I'd been at the baby shower with. So in my head, I was like, well, I've just seen you. So that it wasn't even necessarily that they were my closest friends. It was more just like, well, I remember you and I know you're around today. And it was weird.
Just automatic pilot.
Yeah.
All I'm hearing here is I bet that you really needed Amy.
Yeah, I really did. And I did say that. I literally said, I kept saying to the ambulance people, no, my best friend's just died. And my best friend's just died this year. So this is like...
This can't be happening.
This can't be happening because my best friend's not here. So that's what I need. And then I phoned, funnily enough, Amy's sister, Mia, who is my son's godmother, her old sister. And I phoned and said, can you just come and get Reg, please? And she was like, well, what's happened? And I said, I think Mike's died. And it was really odd because people were like, what do you mean you think he's died? And I was like, well, the ambulance people are here now, but I think that's what's happened, but I don't know. So she came and took my son home with her. And I just remember thinking, and I sat down in my kitchen and my friend Eleanor arrived and she said, do you want a glass of wine? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want right now. I'm going to have a glass of wine. And I drank a bottle of wine, I'm going to say in about 7 minutes. Like I drank it like it was actual water.
Yeah. Anything to just
I didn't feel
nothing.
Like, and just something to like, okay, well, here's a way to cope, which is ridiculous, but that's what I had in my head. And then the ambulance people kept popping down to ask questions. They were like, is he on any medication? Is he, has he got any history of this? And I thought, well, perhaps he's not dead because they're asking an awful lot of questions.
Yes.
They've been up there a really long time. And then more ambulance people turned up. So at one point, I had this sort of big L-shaped sofa in my kitchen. And at one point, it was completely full up with people. There were about 4 ambulance people.
It's like a circus.
And it was, and me and my friend, and I was just kind of sat there drinking wine. And they were asking me all sorts of questions. They were like, oh, how long have you been married? Blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, this is just odd.
Why do they need to know all this? Yeah.
And then one of the ambulance drivers was talking about, I can't remember what it was, but she had some sort of problem. And she was saying, oh, I'm having a nightmare at the moment because blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, yeah, but my husband's dead, like just upstairs. Like, why are we talking about, like, it was just odd. And then they eventually came downstairs. A lady came down and she said, oh, I'm sorry to tell you that your husband has passed away. And I kind of went, yeah, okay, like, sure. Like, that's what I was expecting. And then she said, so we have to call the police because he's died at home unexpectedly. So I was like, oh, right, yeah. So then the police came. And so now we've got 4 ambulance drivers and 2 police. And then they called the undertakers and there were 2 of them. So then the 2 undertakers turned up. So it was like a party in my kitchen.
Yeah.
With all these people. And then the ambulance driver said, oh, what we've done is we've laid him on the bed if you want to come and spend some time with him. And my first thought was, I literally changed the bedding the day before. Like, it was lovely, fresh bedding. And I was thinking, and you've put a dead body on my clean bed. And they were like, do you want to come and spend time with him? And I was like, no, I don't want to lay with a dead body on my bed. That's my bed.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, great. Like, I can't
Isn't it funny where your
imagine.
brain goes, that your husband's dying, you're thinking, no, change that bloody
Yes,
bedding
and now you
yesterday.
put a dead body on it. I'm going to have to do it again. It was
Yeah.
just odd. And then the police asked if they could interview my son. And thankfully, my friend Eleanor, her husband's a murder detective.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He said, you don't have to give permission for that. And I was like, okay, good. Like, so no, you can't talk to my son about this. It's bad enough. You can talk to me. And then I found myself saying really random things. Like, I was going, well, I've been out all day. It's nothing to do with me. You can check our Ring doorbell. I definitely wasn't, like, and like there at no point was anyone accusing me of anything nefarious, but in my head I was like, no, you can check the doorbell. Like, I've just got home. I've been with my friend Eleanor. Eleanor, haven't I been with you?
Yeah.
And then the undertakers kind of took him away, and they gave me a card saying this is where he'll be. And they kept talking about him like he was alive. They were like, we'll look after him. And if you want to come and see him. And I was thinking, that's just odd. That's just a really odd. Okay. And then my other friend Andy arrived because then Eleanor was going to go and tell my mum, and she said, we can't phone your mum. And because obviously I've been with Mike for 23 years and my mum's an old lady. And so she was like, I'm going to go. And then we also had to tell my husband's older children. So Eleanor was like, I'm going to phone their mum. Do you have her number? Because they can't be told over the phone, but I can tell her and she can go and tell them. I say, yeah. So she was brilliant. But then she had to go and tell my mum, which would have left me in this massive house all by myself. And the house that was full of, like, there were the tracks of the trolley from the ambulance. They'd left loads of blankets and like bits all over the floor. Like, it looked like a crime scene, and everyone had gone.
And it's just you.
And it was just me. So then she phoned our other friend Andy, and she basically phoned him and said, can you come and sit here while I go and do this? And then I'll come back and get Jen. And so that was kind of what happened on the night. And then what is mental, and part of the reason why I really wanted to do this podcast, because I listened to it religiously, like, because someone recommended it. And then I was like, right, I'm going to listen to all of these.
It's quite a lot now, isn't it?
Which I do. Yeah. But I'm
fill your dog walk days.
Really, it's filled up the year. It's been great. Was that after this had all happened, the following day, I got a phone call from my husband's work to say, we're very sorry to hear. I'd started phoning people. I had to, you have to make it.
You have to, yeah.
And I'd started phoning people, and then one of those people we knew through Mike's work, and he was a CEO of a company. He earned a lot of money, and he had a very, very big job. And they phoned me the day after and just sort of said, thoughts and prayers. And I said, what do I do for money? Like, because I'm a teacher, and I've got this big house and this big life, and I can't pay for it. And they said, oh, yeah, sorry, obviously, real shame, but there's no death in service. And obviously, we're going to stop paying him as of today.
Oh,
and I was like, okay, well, can you explain to me how that works? And they were like, oh, well, yeah, because, there wasn't death in service. Funnily enough, it was Mike's job to sort out. And he hadn't. A colleague of his had died of cancer about a year before, and his wife hadn't been left with anything. And he had basically convinced some of the partners to put some money towards this woman and her kids. And then he had said to me, I'm going to sort out death in service. But he hadn't sorted it out. And they basically said, well, we're not. And then they said, as only very, very rich people can do, they said, well, now's not the time to worry about money. And I was like, oh, no, but it is. It is the time to worry about money. I literally, I'm all on my own, and I've got a kid and a house, and I don't know what to do. And they were like, well, don't worry about that now. And we had, I don't know why, I still to this day don't know why, because my husband earned after tax about 11 grand a month. We had £1,000 in our account, and that was it. And I don't really know why. I don't know what he'd spent his money on, but by the time all our bills came out, there was nothing left. And
I
I
can
think,
remember looking at my bank account actually because I was on maternity leave,
mm,
and we never had a shared bank account. I don't know why, I've just never done it, and because all his bank accounts were kind of immediately frozen because he was
yeah,
missing. And I can't remember the exact figure, but it was something like 57 quid in my bank account. And I just remember thinking the same as you, like, how, what?
oh,
Ben was the earner. I had a job teaching baby swimming just to kind of pocket money, you know?
yeah,
And it's, you feel so mercenary
mm,
being worried about money. And you feel like people think you're this kind of grabby widow. But
mm,
bills still have to be paid. Ben had a car on finance that I didn't actually know was on finance that cost £650 before I drove the fucking thing off the drive.
mm.
Like, and they wouldn't take it back because he wasn't dead. So
Yeah.
legally,
Well, the funny thing
it's
is, you think that if someone is dead, it's more clear cut, but it's weirdly not. So there were loads of things where, you know, and over the year, I'm still making phone calls with like, well, can I speak to Mr. Plant? And I'm like, no, he died. But one of the first things that happened to me was when we finally, so we didn't get the death certificate for a week because he had to have an autopsy because it was sudden.
yes.
And they said it was a massive heart attack, and then everything can kind of start going through. So I got the death certificate, and I thought I was being very, very efficient. And I had my list of jobs every day. And my friend Mia, Amy's sister, she was brilliant, and she was, you know, right, come on, today we're doing these jobs, and I'd be like, okay. And I felt poorly. I felt like I've never felt. I wasn't sad initially. I just felt ill. I felt like dizzy and sick, and like I was swimming through treacle, and like I couldn't eat anything, and I couldn't. And it's that thing where people say, "I'll try and eat something." It's like, no, it's not that I've not got an appetite. It's that I literally cannot get the. I can't chew anymore. Like it just won't go down my throat.
I
I
used to
mean,
find that wine slipped it down
yes,
very
the
well.
wine. The wine was no problem, but the
Mm.
food. And then in the end, I bought those, like, do you know those milkshakes that are for people when they're.
Mate, I live on it's not Huel, it's another
Oh yeah.
one, and I live on those because I still find it very difficult to eat, and I wish
Mm,
I was like a size 8 slip of a thing, but unfortunately,
it's
and then I have a cook meal, you know, the ready
yeah,
meals, the
yeah,
cook meals,
yeah.
in the freezer of dreams, which is what I call it. So
Lovely,
just pick something from
lovely.
the freezer of dreams, because ever since Ben died, I've lost my interest in initially reading. I've only just started reading again fairly
Mm,
recently. Food, you know, it just ceased to bring me the joy that it used to.
yeah.
And yeah,
And it was weird because I'm normally someone that would be like, oh, lovely, and I have a bar of chocolate and that, but I couldn't eat anything. And anyway, so I was giving myself jobs to stop myself thinking about how awful I felt, because then I suddenly started to think, well, I can't die because then Reg has got no one. So I've got to stay alive, but I don't know how, like, you know, I can't function. And I felt like, I was saying this to someone the other day, I felt like for that first couple of weeks, I was just being dragged around like a little dolly, and people were just telling
puppet.
me where to go and where to stand and what to do.
Yeah, the puppet.
Um, and my mum and my stepdad were brilliant, but they were kind of just, you know, like, right, and what we've done is we've made you dinner and we've looked after Reg, and I was kind of, okay, thank you. I just had no capability at all.
Mm. You become quite
Um,
infantilized, don't you? Because my
oh,
parents moved in
massively.
with me, and you know, my dad would do the school run, so I would often be in no fit state to drive,
Mm,
um, be it hungover or be it you know, just devastation.
mm,
And yeah, I became quite reliant on the fact that they would ensure that the kid, like my mum, my daughter was 6 months old, so my mum basically weaned her. She used she exclusively weaned on Ella's pouches
mm.
because who had time for
No,
pureeing,
no,
right?
no one's pureeing.
No, not past the first job. And it was, I became like almost a teenager again, you know, like
Mm,
it is infantilizing, and everybody, I like your analogy of being like a doll. I always think kind of like a puppet. You just sort
mm.
of go through the
Yeah.
motions doing what you have to, but you're not really dealing with anything that's going on inside your own head.
No, and I felt like I was doing this kind of weird act. I was doing this, like, I remember saying to my counsellor at the time, I felt like people were coming to the grieving widow show.
Yes.
So I had kind of
Yes.
this people coming to visit to see what it looked like when someone's husband had died. And then, like, when I took the death certificate to the registry, or when I went to the registry office to get the death certificate, my friend Mia had worn black. She'd worn this lovely black coat, this black, you know, like black boots, and I was wearing jeans and a bright pink jumper that said bonjour. because my brain just hadn't thought. I just got up and put some clean clothes on. I hadn't really thought about it. So when we got to the registry office, the lady was like doing all the talking to Mia, because she looked like the grieving
She looked
widow.
like the widow.
She was doing a great job of it, and I looked like kind of bonjour.
The support.
Yeah, the support person. Anyway, we did that. We registered the death, and then I thought, right, I'll go straight to the bank and I'll say he has died, and because that's one of the things I have to do. And the bank cancelled my cards instead of his. So then when I went to pay for the funeral the day after, none of my cards worked. And I phoned the bank, and the bank said, oh, we're really sorry. Someone in branch has made a mistake and we've cancelled all of your cards. We can get new cards to you within 3 to 5 working days. But by this point, it's like getting on for December, and there was a postal strike. You might remember, but there was a massive postal strike. And I was like, no, but I don't have any money. I said, I can't put petrol in my car. I can't get bus fare for my son to get to school, because at this point I was thinking he'll be back at school soon. He wasn't, but that was where my brain was going. I was like, I can't buy any food. And then my friend got a Revolut card and just put some money on it and said, that's for you. My other friend was like, here's a credit card you can have. My mum and dad were like going to the cash point and giving me cash. But I felt like I didn't even have control of the money. And the worst thing was, everyone assumed I was going to be some sort of very, very wealthy merry widow. But it turned out Mike didn't have a will. He didn't have death in service. He didn't have any life insurance.
Oh, Mike.
I know. And he was the CEO of a law firm.
Mike.
Yeah. So he had sorted nothing out, because he used to say he was going to live to 100. It was like a running joke, and it just hadn't occurred to him.
They think they're invincible, don't they? I have to tell you, I was gobsmacked that Ben had life insurance.
Yeah.
And that it covers extreme sports, because it didn't cover our mortgage, but it helped.
Yeah.
But yes, I like you, people, I think, because I still had this nice shiny car on the drive and a nice house, and people thought I must be kind of rolling around in life insurance cash like Scrooge McDuck, but I certainly wasn't.
People say at least she's sorted.
Yeah.
Well, at least she'll
And
be sorted.
I believe that Ben thought I would be sorted, because Ben was an early adopter of cryptos, and he had quite all of our money was in crypto, basically. And when he died, his brother, who doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can say this, offered to look after this quite substantial amount of money for me, and lost a lot, which is, I now realise, the gamble of cryptocurrencies. And so, because I kind of remember thinking, well, if Ben had a moment before he died, at least he'd be thinking, okay, I have put aside this pot of money, they'll be okay. And actually, there's nothing. There was a bit, and I sold. Ben had a wood flooring business, and he had some stored in our garage. And the customer sort of awkwardly rang me and said, is there any chance I can buy this wood? And I just sort of said, well, you can, but, and HMRC come after me if they want, but I just said, you're going to have to give me cash though, because I can't. And so there I am selling wood panels out of my garage, because you do what you got to do to put food on the table.
I sold loads of stuff from the garage. But there were things that were annoying, like we'd had a holiday booked for the following Easter, and I called Tui and said, can I just have my money back? I think we've paid $2,000 towards it, but they'd only put it back on Mike's credit card, which should have been cancelled. So I may as well have gone on that holiday. He'd ordered himself he loved gadgets. He'd ordered himself a thing that converted a bike into an electric bike. And that arrived, it was about 800 quid. And if I sent it back, then the company, it would just go back on his credit card. So I went on a Facebook group and said, does anyone want this for 500 quid?
Yes, I was the same. I had a lot of dive kit and stuff in the garage, which I initially, that superhuman strength you get sometimes.
Yeah.
I was literally like throwing the tanks around, like just furiously raging. And I actually gave away a lot of his stuff, because I moved in lockdown and I just had to get rid of stuff. I just remember putting it all on my drive, just saying, come and get it. And now I think, oh, should I have kept some of his really random toolbox and stuff? But in that moment, you just have to, I don't know if there's much of a market for middle-aged mums on OnlyFans, but, if it had come to it, that's what you'd have to do, right?
I genuinely was thinking, like, well, what can I do? Because I've got, I'm a deputy head. That's a pretty good job. But what it isn't, and this is what I was trying to say to people, is our life is based on someone who runs a law firm who's married to
Yeah,
a
it's
teacher.
not an
It's not
11K
based.
a month salary, is
Yeah,
it? You
it's
know,
not
no
that.
matter how well paid or brilliant these jobs are in education, they're never
It's
going to
not
bring home
that.
salaries like that.
So it took and in the end, I had to get it and then he had a pension, but because he didn't have a will, it wasn't automatically mine.
That's
Even though,
unusual.
and I assumed if you've been married for 20 years, but
Yes.
no, it still has to go through a process. We also had the one thing that, you know, when you get a mortgage, you have to get that cover for if one of you dies, the mortgage gets paid.
Yeah, I don't know how we got away with that. I think it was tied to our old mortgage from our
Oh,
summer house,
maybe.
because
Yeah,
I
maybe.
still can't figure out how he got away with taking out less than the house, unless it was what the house was worth.
It
But no,
could
it
be.
should cover the and I don't understand that because
Well, no, because it is for an amount, because it was really interesting. Mine was for an amount, and actually that was more than was left on the mortgage, but it was only the amount. So obviously if it had been less, I think that can happen. But even then, and you know how like the banks go, there are adverts on the radio. If you're having trouble paying your mortgage, just call us. I phoned the bank and said, look, my husband's just died. I just need a couple of months. I don't know what's happening. And they were like, oh no, you need to keep paying it. And I
see,
was like,
this
oh,
is
but I could. So
terrible.
everything I tried, and my husband was a really private person as well. So I don't know the password to his iPhone. I didn't know the password to his computers. All of our bills were not on paper. So at
Everything's
one point,
online.
I spent one afternoon, a fun afternoon, phoning every single insurance company saying, hello, is my house insured with you? And
Oh
going through the same
wow.
thing over and over again. Because we always had this relationship where he would just take care of things. And I was just like, okay. And even though I'm a perfectly capable person, it was always, that's what
You
he
do
would do.
well, you divide and conquer, don't you? You take on certain
Yeah.
aspects of running a home,
Yeah.
and I'm the same. And you probably have heard this already, so I'm probably repeating myself. But I, like you, didn't find out that Ben was like you and your friend. I didn't find out that Ben had died until many hours later, and I feel a huge resentment.
Mm,
But that same day, I stood in the school playground, waiting for the boys. You know, baby in the pram, still living my
mm,
happy life, and
yeah.
as you do, just jokingly sort of went, oh gosh, you know, I don't even know who we pay our electric and gas with. Like, if Ben dropped dead tomorrow, I wouldn't have any clue where to start. And the
Oh
irony
my
of that is
God.
obviously not lost on me now.
No, yeah, yeah.
But I was the
The
same.
same.
I did have his pin to his phone, so I was able to access his phone, but I can't remember it now for love nor money.
Mm,
And I was, you know, I everything was kind of put into hiatus until I got the death certificate. But I do remember this feeling of making these calls and just constantly having to repeat your story
mhm,
and tell people what happened.
yeah.
Um, and the death admin is ridiculous. It is
It was a
absolutely
full-time job.
ridiculous.
And I
Yeah.
remember in the end, there was a charity who was sort of affiliated with firms of lawyers, effectively. And someone who worked for Mike basically said, contact these people. And I contacted them and just said, look, I don't know what to do. I can't pay my mortgage. Basically, everything I'd been told was going to take at least 6 months. And I was like, our mortgage was £2,500 a month. And I earned £3,000 a month at the time. So I just thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I've sent an email to this charity saying that I feel mental about this, but can you help? And they said, yeah, we'll send you 6 months mortgage money. So they sent me a check for 15 grand. And if it
Oh
hadn't been for them,
wow.
I don't know what I would have done.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and then my mum said to me, do you know about widow's benefit? And I was like, no, I don't. And then we looked into it and I could get, I think it was like £2,500 lump sum and then 350 quid a month.
Yeah, not really enough to raise a child, is it?
It isn't.
If Ben had died 2 months sooner, all three of my children, I would have received money for them until they were 18.
Oh, wow.
The law changed 2 months prior. So
Oh,
yeah, I know. But I also know that then it can affect if you have to take on any other benefits for any other reasons. It
mhm.
can affect that. So it can almost have a
Detrimental,
negative
yeah.
detriment. That's the word. Thank you.
I'm an English
Um,
teacher. It's a habit.
yeah. Oh, you teach English. Oh,
Yes.
wow. Yeah, that's my favorite subject, and my son's favorite subject too. But you, sorry, my brain dropped out. It's because we went on to a different subject.
Sorry, it's my
Oh,
fault.
no, it's me. So 1, 2, 3. We're just going to go back in. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So it's things like the kindness or
Mm,
knowing charities to approach that might be able to help you. I mean, actually, my dad. who is a former journalist. So he's quite both my parents were journalists, so they're pretty persistent. And they decided to contact the CEO of each company that I owed money to, right? Mortgage, car, blah, blah, blah. And the mortgage company gave me I think they gave me a hiatus of a couple of months, and then they put me onto interest only, which just took the payments right
Yeah.
down. And so I was able to sort of muddle through, and I met with a benefits advisor because I'd never claimed benefits, and because I was now technically running this wood company, I was able to pay myself for the relevant hours and claim benefits. And it's something that there's a shame attached to often. But for me, in that moment, it saved me. I was able to work around the children. I was able to be there when they needed me to pick them up. I was there every day at school, and they were little. They were 7, 11, and 6. 7, 5, and 6 months. They needed me, and I am grateful that I was able to do that. But it's knowing the right places to look. I mean, widow payment. I didn't know about that. My dad found out about that, and you only have a year to claim it, or something stupid as well, don't you?
And
It's
and that's the thing. My mum and dad were my mum and stepdad were like, "What about this? What about that? What about that?" And I was like, "Oh God, yeah, like okay." But again, it kind of I had this big folder, and I'd just sit at my kitchen table with this big folder and the phone, and I'd be on hold for an hour and a half to various people, and that was my job. And I remember saying to my boss, I didn't go back to work until the beginning of January, and that whole kind of up to Christmas, I said, I'm working full time. I'm literally working. I mean, what I'm actually doing is waking up really hungover, and I'm getting out of my pajamas at about 11 o'clock. And then I'm sitting at that table and doing admin until about 6 o'clock. And by the time everything closes, I went through a phase of I couldn't be in the house on my own. I couldn't be in the house, just me and Reg. I was convinced I was going to die and he'd have to deal with all of that again. I felt really fragile. I needed lots of people around me all of the time just to function. And it was funny because my friends had started, they'd get into a rhythm of handing me over. So friends who didn't know each other. My friend Gemma and my friend Vasa, they don't really know each other. But Gemma would be like, well, I can stay until Saturday at 2 o'clock. And Vasa would, well, I'll arrive at 1. And then Eleanor would be, well, I can come on Sunday. And I couldn't sleep in my bedroom.
No, understandably.
Because there was this, dead body there.
And you clean sheets.
And so I slept in a spare room. Up until the point I had people staying, I suddenly realised there wasn't quite enough space and that I'd have to sleep in my bed. And I did, and I hated it. And I basically got very, 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 very drunk and passed out in bed. And then as soon as I woke up, kind of sprung out of bed, but got used to it in the end. And when the funeral happened, which was on the 12th of December, by the time the funeral came, I think it was after the funeral, I slept in my bed again. So it wasn't a huge amount of time. And the funeral was interesting because it was all of those people were under the impression that Mike and I were perfect. Everyone was like, how's she going to cope? Because they were perfect. And I'm quite prolific on Facebook. I'm a nightmare for it. I'm a bit of a show off. And we would go to lots of nice places and we would go on lots of holidays and we would have these date nights that looked incredible. And so someone even commented on Facebook saying, oh, I've always enjoyed watching you guys, like we're a TV show.
Yes. Yeah.
And that we just appeared to be perfect. We've been married for such a long time, 20 years and, still having sex and still having a laugh and, what a great couple they are.
You're like this aspirational couple.
Yeah, kind of. I promise I'm not a dickhead. It makes me sound like a dickhead, but
I don't think you're a dickhead. I wouldn't be talking to you.
We used to say that we used to talk about moral offsetting, where I had a really good and noble job and Mike had a really well-paid job. So between us, we were, effectively the perfect couple. There was something for everyone there, and we weren't perfect, but that was everyone's perception of us. And I really felt it at I did a photo montage thing for the wake, how you do, and it's on a big screen. Yeah. And I was looking at the photographs thinking, that does look like the perfect life. But it wasn't. And as soon as Mike had been dead for he'd been dead about 6 weeks, just after Christmas. And I suddenly realised that I felt lighter. I felt like there was a weight off my shoulders. I suddenly felt like I could do what I liked. And I spoke to my counsellor and I said, oh, it's really weird. I feel really good at the moment. I feel really like I can do what I like. And she said, well, you were in a very controlling marriage. And I said, no, I wasn't. And she said, no, you were. And she said, it wasn't the right time for me to talk to you about it because you were working through it yourself and you were coming to that conclusion. But you had been apologetic for 23 years. You'd had like a parent-child relationship where he told you what to do and you did it. And you were effectively his trophy, his kind of like, I reel out my lovely wife and there she is. And you didn't have an equal relationship and you were bullied. You were bullied all the time. And I said, oh no, but he was a really great man and he was a really great dad. And my counsellor said, okay, in what way was he a great dad? And I was like, oh, well, you know, he provided for us and this and that. And she said, yeah. She said, but then he'd been dead about 5 hours and your son didn't notice. And I was like, oh, yeah. I said, but, you know, he was busy on his PlayStation. And she kind of said, sure. But that was a Sunday that they had together. And as far as Reg was concerned, it was perfectly normal that they'd be in separate rooms doing totally separate things. And I thought, yeah, okay. But I was still a bit like, oh, come on, you know, don't be silly. And then as time kind of wore on, and it kind of January and February, and I started to realise that I felt a lot of shock about what had happened and a lot of sadness about the fact that Reg didn't have a dad anymore. And I felt sad for Mike. I felt like that's really sad for him that he just died because he was, you know, worked so hard and then he just died and he didn't get to retire. He didn't get to do all these fun things. But I thought, God, I don't miss him. And I started to really try. So I started to like get out photographs and
Sad music.
try and put sad music on and watch it. And I just couldn't make myself sad because overridingly, I just had this feeling of, oh, I can be myself now. And then when I thought about it, I thought, God, I actually have never been myself. I was 19. I met this man. He was more exciting and glamorous than me. And I made myself the version of myself that I thought he would want. And I hadn't stopped in 23 years to think, well, actually, what am I like? And it was really interesting. One of his best friends, Rich, came round about a week or so after he died. And I was telling an anecdote about something. And Rich said, wow, do you know, this is the first time in 23 years I've heard you tell a story without someone correcting you. And I thought, oh, God. And that's one of Mike's friends. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And then I noticed that, like, I dressed differently to how I dressed then. And, you know, like, Mike would like be like, I don't like your hair too blonde. And so I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll darken it a bit. Or he'd say, you know, you really should think about getting back to the gym. And I hadn't noticed it. But then when it was gone, when it was all removed, and I suddenly thought, well, what do I want to wear? Or what do I want to do? So I kind of felt this sense of like, okay, well, I'm, you know, and I remember friends saying to me, well, it's probably not hit you yet. Because I kept saying to my friends, I feel all right. I feel really okay. And they were like, well, because it's not hit you yet. And I was like, no, I think it did hit me. I think I was sad, but I didn't expect by January, February time to feel okay. I've still got PTSD. I'm still like, if I come home and I can't find anyone, I assume they've died. I'm still not great with driving because Amy died in a car accident and I wasn't great with that. Then I got out of the habit of driving and I'm still a bit like, I'll do it, but I hate it. And
I don't love driving actually. I same, I'll do it, but
I'll do it to somewhere close. If it's a motorway job, I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, I will do it, but it's if John's around, I know.
Yeah.
Then he'll do it.
Exactly that. And I kept waiting for this. I kept waiting for this kind of, I felt it's really difficult because there was something that was said on your podcast, right? And I can't remember who said it. It might have been you. It might have been one of your guests. And someone said that it's perfectly okay for me to have been the love of Mike's life, but for him not to have been the love of mine.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realised that at the point that he died, I didn't love him anymore. There had been a time he had been my great love. And I think he still felt that way about me when he died. But I didn't feel that way about him because I'd grown up and I wasn't this 19-year-old and I'd become my own person. And so all of a sudden I felt this kind of sense of freedom, which I then felt horribly guilty about. But then I started to notice it in my son. and my son got a lot more talkative, and he
That's
started, and
interesting.
I suddenly thought, and obviously he loved his dad so much, but I suddenly thought, oh God, I think you're slightly better for it just being me and you. You know, we're not, and we kind of got into this routine where it was the two of us and we were okay. And I noticed that we were, you know, that thing where, you know, someone's died, so you're like, I'm going to spend what little money I have on going to Legoland and Chessington. And,
Yeah.
you
I'm going
know,
to make their life perfect. They're
yeah,
going to
you're
want
going
for
to have the
nothing.
best time. And I was doing that with friends and noticing that I didn't have that feeling of, I used to always have this eggshell feeling of, I'm getting it wrong, I'm getting it wrong, I'm getting it wrong. I'm not a very good mum, I'm not a very good wife. And I suddenly was kind of felt really confident that I was a good mum, and I felt really confident that I was a good friend, and I felt like people wanted to hang out with me, and I'd lost kind of the kind of paranoia of, oh God, you know, these people, you know, like Michael, as you say, you're a bit loud, or, you know, or you're a bit, you know, over the top then, or, and I'd think, oh God, I thought I was being funny. Okay.
Oh.
And so without that voice in my ear, I felt like a completely different person. And I realised that where we lived was in the middle of nowhere, and I realised I hated it, and I didn't want to live in the middle of nowhere, and that's not me. That's not who I am. I like being in the middle of stuff. And I put the house on the market, and then realised that we lived in this really expensive area in this massive house that I hated. Like, I had a genuine hatred to, you know, Mike had died there. I'd found out Amy had died there. It was too big. It wasn't very me at all. I like old stuff, and I like weird things, and I like art.
Oh my God, you have to come to my house. There's so much weird stuff in my house.
That's what I'm after.
16th century, there's some
Oh,
very
well,
old
see,
stuff.
mine's still new, because I was like, but my new house is on a river, and there's boats and there's stuff, and it's a 2-minute walk to a gin distillery and a 5-minute walk to a cinema, and it's in the middle of things. And I realised that's who I am.
Yeah.
And I sort of, and it feels really awful, but sometimes I feel like I have more in common with someone who's divorced.
Yes, I understand that. I can sort of hear that.
And I kind of, every now and again, I will refer to Mike as my ex-husband, because when you say to someone your late husband, in their mind, that's like, oh my God, how very sad for you. And it was really sad. This is the thing that's difficult. It was the worst thing that's ever happened. I will never be sadder than when Amy died. So I was already like, it's okay, the worst thing that could ever happen to me has happened. So I kind of, but also because of that, I've got to live the life that I think that I wanted to live. And that's sad, and that is awful. And Mike didn't believe in afterlife at all. He thought it was all bollocks. And if he did, I might even feel more guilty about it. But he didn't believe in that. He didn't think that would happen. And when I got together with my partner now, I think it was probably, so it was my friend Andy who was friends with me and Eleanor, and he'd split up from his kind of long-term girlfriend, and he has a daughter who's 7, and it would always be on the weeks he has to have 7 days on and 7 days off. And on the weekends he had her, I'd always say, well, if you and Matilda are doing this, do you want to come and do this with me and Reg? Because it sort of seemed like
Yeah.
you're on
Safety in
your own.
numbers, right?
Yeah, and also I don't like to drive. And I don't like doing stuff on my own. I still had that thing of like, what if something happens to me? And, you know.
Yeah.
So we started kind of doing stuff with the kids, and it was like, well, we'll do this and we'll do that, blah, blah, blah. And so when we got together, which was kind of officially around Easter time, a lot of people thought I was terrible, because they were like, oh my God, it's been 6 months, and, you know, that's really soon, and blah, blah, blah. But I just thought, no, I've met someone who makes me really happy, and you could drop dead tomorrow. It happened to Amy, happened to Mike. So I just thought, well, that's, you know, that's lovely, and I don't really care what people think. And then we bought.
Good for you, actually, though, for being brave enough to have that attitude, because I know that I was so terrified when I came out as being in a relationship.
Yeah.
And you do feel like that you kind of, your public property, we talk about this quite a lot, and everybody has got an opinion. John and I got together within a year of Sarah dying, and that he still loves Sarah, but we met, it felt right. And look at us now, it works.
And what's the
And
point of being on your own and sad?
no, and what's the point of letting life pass you by? Now, I'm just going to quickly bring you the soulmate thing.
Mm,
So, the I interviewed a really amazing Canadian lady called Laurie recently, and she said you have to let go of the soulmate thing. The idea that there's only one. Should your soulmate might be your friend, it could be an
mm,
animal. You could have lots of soulmates. And the way that you talk about Amy, like she was your soulmate, and
mm.
I lost my best friend when he was
Oh, I'm sorry.
23. Yeah, suddenly, and he was my he was my best friend. He was a wonderful chap funnily enough, called John.
Mm,
And so, although it was many years ago, I miss him desperately.
mm.
Um, and this idea that you were perhaps the love of Mike's life, but perhaps you still have more love to give, and
Mm.
perhaps he wasn't your person in the end, because to go from 19 to Derek, can I ask how old you are now?
43 now.
42, same,
Mm.
I'm 42, same sort of age. I'm certainly not the same person I was at
No.
19, and I'm not the same person I was 5, 6 years
Yeah.
ago, but it, you kind of grow up together, but you can grow in different directions. And I feel really sad that I had a much older boyfriend when I was 17, actually, and he was
Mm,
28, and we spent about 3 years together, and he was incredibly controlling of me.
mm.
And I really kind of created this persona to fit in, and would go out. He liked me to wear really skimpy kind of going out outfits, and then would call me
Yeah.
slag, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was lovely. And he got a pretty bad cocaine habit and things. And I don't know what became of him. This is so long ago, but it's a kind of, I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together. Like
Yeah.
how, because you are, even though you say yourself you were quite a grown up 19-year-old, you were still
I was
19.
still
Like, yeah.
19. And also, I think that 19-year-old me needed someone like that. I needed someone solid, independent. My parents had got divorced. My mum's third husband was a bit of a one, and it was quite, and I'd left home when I was 18 because of that. And she's now remarried to my stepdad. He's the loveliest man in the
So
world.
is your mum might be married for 4 times?
4 times,
What a legend.
yeah. She's brilliant. She's like, I just believe in marriage, Jenny. I'm like, okay.
Love her.
But yeah, she, we had this kind of, I think I needed like a dad almost. I needed like a
Yes,
really
a
solid person.
protector.
And it wasn't Mike's fault that I grew out of that, but I just wasn't doing anything about it. I knew I was really unhappy. As soon as Amy had died, I knew I was really unhappy, but I wasn't doing anything about it. I was just kind of stuck in this kind of, but we've got this stable house and I've got this perfect life. And I kept believing my own hype. I kept thinking, well, I can't leave because I've got this perfect life. And it kind of, once everything got completely screwed up and everything was a disaster, and it was, I wish Mike was alive. I wish we'd got divorced. I wish Reg could go and see him at the weekends. I'm sure we'd have got on really well because we always did get on really well. But that wasn't to be. But that means I can't kind of fake the sad. I can't be like, I can't. People can't come and see the Grieving Widow show because it's not on anymore.
It's not available.
And when I met Andy, I found it really difficult because he and I have got loads in common in terms of like when we get annoyed, like, oh, my ex used to blah, 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 blah. And both of us, when we got together, we said we were both like, we've got a rescue cat called Lily. And, and whenever you walk into a room, she acts like you're going to murder her. Even though we never do.
I'm glad you clarified.
When we first got together, we used to say we're both like Lily the cat. Like, I'm apologising and saying, oh, I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. He was a bit like that too, because of the way things were in our relationships before. And I think that, but it's an awkward one because Mike has died, so he's not an ex. So when we first got together, there were loads of pictures of Mike up in the house, which is obviously because that's Reg's dad, and of course, but there was still our wedding picture up. And at what point in your new relationship do you say, I'm going to take down this wedding picture? We've got the fact that I've got 2 stepchildren and 2 step grandchildren, and obviously,
oh wow, yeah, oh gosh, well, that makes you
because
feel
they're in their 30s, so it kind of makes sense, right? But that's really difficult because obviously, from what do I do with my with my stepchildren? Obviously, I've seen them, but as in Andy can't be part of that, or certainly he doesn't feel like he can, and they don't feel like they want him to either, and that's really awkward. When it's an ex, you're allowed to slag them off. When it's someone that died, you can't.
No, and they become a little bit canonized, don't they? And it's it's quite easy almost to only ever talk about the positives of the person
Mm,
that's died, and because you don't want to speak ill of the dead. And my relationship with Ben was solid, and it was very, very good. But there were times in our relationship, I had
mm,
terrible postnatal depression after our second child, and his dad died, and we struggled. And
mm,
and it depends on where you are in your relationship at the time, particularly if you have a
mm.
sudden death. I
Yeah.
spoke when Ben first died. A very nice German woman reached out to me through a friend, and she had a row with her husband, and he'd driven off driving too fast,
Oh God.
and so the last words were a row. And I thought, oh God, that at least that, and you find yourself comparing your grief, like, oh gosh, at least that didn't happen. And
Oh yeah.
but I feel like you have kind of got this really complex grief because you probably don't really identify as a widow. And my lovely friend Tash, who you may have heard her episode, she is very angry with her late husband
Mm,
because she found out a lot of things about him after he died.
mm.
And so she feels that she doesn't identify as a widow, but she's not divorced. And it does add a complication.
It does. I think the thing that's really difficult is that there are lots of things I never got to say. I think one of the things I'm really, you talked about where you think, oh, well, at least there was that. From my point of view, we'd had a really nice last weekend. We'd had a really good Friday night and a really good Saturday night, and we were getting on really well. And so I'm glad that he died thinking everything's okay. It wasn't okay, but he definitely died thinking it's all right. He, and I think that it's complicated for me because whereas with Amy, I I didn't fall out of love with her. She died and she was my best friend, and still to this day I think, oh, I just text her. Like, I would text her to say I'm doing this, and
It's
she'd be like, why do you think
heartbreaking.
people want to listen to you? And she'd be like, she's my best person. um I don't have that with Mike, and what's really difficult is I'm still really sad about Amy, but no one cares about that because best friend doesn't have the cachet of being a widow.
No, you're right. It doesn't. And yet
So
it's such an
I
enormous
still want to
loss.
tell people about Amy. I still want to shout from the rooftops how much she was the best like the best woman to ever live. She never met Andy, and she would have loved him. Like, she just would have loved
And
him,
she would have supported
and
you
they'd
as
have,
well,
and
which you
she'd have said,
need.
because one of the people that's not her sister Mia hasn't really seen me and doesn't want to meet Andy, and she finds the whole thing. She's basically in poor taste, and she said, I can't. It's too soon. Blah blah blah.
I can't bear this. I really can't bear this. It really, really gets up my nose
Mm.
because how do they know how you feel? And why would anybody want to deny somebody happiness?
I think
And
it's
we're not a performing poodle. We don't have to do the widow dance
I think it's an
and
ego
performance.
thing. I think everybody likes to think that
Yes,
when they die, they'll leave such a big hole, no one will get
but
over.
nobody could replace them.
And I think the only people that have really had a bad reaction to Andy and I being together has actually been Amy's family. So Amy's mum and Amy's sister, who I was very
How
close to.
strange.
And I think that's because in their mind, if I've moved on from Mike already, I've moved on from Amy. That everyone, it's almost that idea of I've got to just start my life again, but Amy hasn't. We were, literally we're
Yeah,
twosome since we were little. And I think that's it. I think that it's interesting because as far as I know, none of Andy's friends and family have found it peculiar. Actually, none of my really close friends or my family, my parents are really like, he seems like a lovely guy. Everyone's been really happy for us. Where it's odd are things like when we bought this house, and I was having to phone up Sky and say, look, I need to cancel, but it's not in my name. It was in my late husband's name, and I'll get you the death certificate. And then having to say, and I'm moving in with my new partner, and this is his name. Like, in moments like that. But then I think that in that first 8 weeks after Mike died, I think that felt like about 10 years.
yeah,
And I think that it's very difficult. I think it's frustrating when people judge, having not realised that time moves differently when someone dies. I think
yeah.
that the last year feels like 5 minutes and 10 years.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that. And there also is this excuse me, this condition called widow's fire, which means that you
Mm.
do seek physical comfort and the reassurance that you are still a sexual being.
Mm.
And I don't think my mum and dad listen anymore. But, you know, for John and I, it started off very much as he was my friend. He was a widow and my friend. And he was, you know, a safe person to talk to. He knows everything about me. And then one night I got pissed and snogged him, and it happened. And yeah, I'm sure there were some judgments, but why would anybody wish for me to be powering through this with 3 small children on my own when I could be doing it with my best
Best
friend?
friend.
And yeah, it's a very peculiar action, but I think you're absolutely right. I think it is the fear of being forgotten. And I repeat this analogy quite a lot, so forgive me if I'm boring people, but it's the idea that I now have 4 children who I love equally. Now, I jestfully tell them who's my favourite each day because, you know, if one of them's been particularly nice, but I didn't stop loving Monty when I had Hector, and I didn't stop loving Hector when I had Tabitha, and I grew extra space in my heart for my stepdaughter. So it's a bit like that. The human heart is pretty flexible, you know, like, and where I went from being in a very loving relationship into another relationship, which is bizarrely slightly more common. Often if people have a slightly more dysfunctional relationship or there's a bit more anger, it can take them longer to move on because they're scared of having that happen again.
Yeah.
But do you know what? I think all power to you, my love. I think fantastic. You grab onto this next chapter of your life and you run with it because you don't know what's coming around the corner. And you've lost 3 people suddenly. I've lost 2 people suddenly. And so if I text my parents and they don't text back, like they will, they're dead, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And you know, John was driving. Yeah, this is going back to when we first started dating, and he was driving back from the airport. He'd been over to Switzerland on a business trip, and he had people in the car. So he might have sent me a sneaky text and just said, "Yeah, I'm on my way," but he didn't really feel it was appropriate. And in the end, I just like rang him, and I'm a bit like a psychopath. I'm like, I'll text. Sometimes I text my eldest kid, you know, because that's how you operate with a 13-year-old, right? And he lives on the top floor. His bedroom's on the top floor. And I would be like, "Are you alive?" It's so stupid.
It's really stupid, but it's that kind of how on earth are you supposed to I think that one of the key things I found from terrible things happening, like last year was a terrible, terrible year, is that all of that sadness has to be counterbalanced. So all of that terrible that happened ultimately has made me appreciate everything I've got now. And some of that terrible that happened was the fact that Mike died and that Amy died. Some of that terrible that happened was the day I cried in my kitchen because I thought my marriage is over and I don't know what to do. And all of that sadness means that now, when this morning Andy was playing 80s cartoon theme tunes, he was literally playing like Thundercats and Inspector Gadget on the Alexa speakers because he was like, this one's a great one, and really making me laugh. That's the payback. That's the joy. Like, I can absolutely appreciate that now because there have been times that are really awful. And what I find interesting is that I think there are people that like to wallow. I think there are people that like to be in grief for a long time. And I'm sure they don't like to, but that's just their character. But like, Reg was the same as me. We got to New Year's Day and Reg went, right, that's that done with now. Come on. And he was like, I'm okay now. Because I'm not that kind of person. There's only a certain, I don't want to feel sad. No one wants to feel sad. But I'm one of those people where if I get the flu, I think, no, if I just like mind over matter, if I just start pottering around, it will go away. I broke my collarbone and they said it will be 12 weeks. And I was like, no, I can deal with this in 6. So I kind of, and although you can't cheat grief and you can't outrun grief, I do think you can make a decision to look for the happy.
Yeah, it's this decision that we talk about this as well. The decision of whether you're going to be miserable or happy, because I know people that are 10 years in and are still stuck in that very, for want of a better word, kind of wallowing phase. And whilst I would never judge someone for the way they grieve, what a waste.
Yeah. And also, like my friend Eleanor said, and it's a really funny thing, before Mike died, at the age I am now, at the age we are now, you've got to think how many good-looking years you've got left, right? And we were sat and we were going like, how many good-looking years do you think you've got left? And we were going, 47's probably. And like we decided like as a formula. And it's not even, I mean, that's kind of a joke, but it's that kind of, how many years are you going to be able to go to things with your kids and join in with it with them? How many years are you going to be able to travel to exciting places and the insurance not be too much? How many years are you going to have where you can stay up till 3 a.m. drinking and then function a little bit the next day? You know, like, how many years are you going to...
I
And
can't
I
do
passed
that.
out. Yeah. Turns out 2 glasses of wine, I've fallen asleep and I don't feel great.
Oh, I'm fully sober, mate.
Um,
I drank myself into full alcoholism when Ben died. I had no choice. It had to go.
oh, well done.
Yeah, I've been clean sober, nearly 2 years
Oh,
now. So
wow.
yeah, March the 6th, I think it'll be. So it's not nearly, actually, it's not nearly 2 years,
Oh,
is
that's
it?
very
There's still quite a
impressive.
way to go. But I keep thinking I've passed the 18 months phase. I don't think I'll ever pick. Well, I can never say never, because I don't know what what the future holds. But
Mm.
I can say with my hand on my heart now that I won't ever pick up an alcoholic drink. But you don't know what's around the corner.
No, and I think, and I used to be one of those people. I was fitness, and dry January, and I'd like try and be, and definitely I drank weight for 3 months. I don't think I was broadly, well, until I went back to work. I was literally starting to drink in the mid-afternoon.
Yeah, I get the school run done, and then, because I had to drive on the
Yes,
school run, and then that was it.
yeah, but I think that, and I think that's true of most people. That's kind of how you cope, isn't it? But I think that there are, what I didn't want to do was end up like one of those old ladies where it's like, well, like, like Mike's mum, where her husband died when she was 50 and she just never got over it. And then she
Yeah.
became a little old lady, sat in a chair. She was an alcoholic. She'd just literally sit and drink and smoke in her chair all day in the living room. And I thought, I can't be that. And I think there was an element of, that's what people expect of you, where they're like, oh, this lady here, we had one in our road, really nice lady. Her husband died, and then she became the lady that everyone looked after. And I thought, I don't want to be that. But I will say, and for the point of record, I also fell in love with someone. I also met someone who made me feel like Amy did. I met someone who thought I was hilarious and didn't try and change the way I was, and thinks I'm really clever, and thinks I'm, and wants to hear what I have to
Interesting,
say.
and yeah.
Yeah. And so I met that person. What am I going to do? Say to, and I remember actually when we first kind of talked about getting together, like you do in a very grown up way, for people in your 40s, like, well, shall we?
Yeah, I know, it's so different, isn't it?
When we had that conversation, I remember me sort of saying, oh, I don't know how soon is too soon. I don't know what people will think. He felt really embarrassed because he felt like, I don't want people to think I'm that guy who was your friend, who was constantly kind of waiting in the
Sort of
wings.
swooped in on you.
Yeah, and that he kind of waited till I was vulnerable and then made a move. He said, I don't want people thinking that. And we kind of had like these long conversations about it. And then I said to him, but there isn't a rule book for this because it's an unusual situation. And also my mum said a thing when I said to my mum about, oh, like, Andy likes me and I think I like him, but it's a bit too soon. And my mum was like, well, how long do you expect him to wait for you? And I was like, oh, well, I wouldn't expect him to wait. And if he met someone else, and my mum was like, really? And if he met someone else, you'd be fine with it, would you? And I was like, well, no, I'd be really sad. And she was like, well, that's kind of your answer. But
Wise mum.
she's been married the great thing about my mum, because she's been married 4 times and no one's died.
I was going to say, has she ever been
No,
widowed?
she's never been widowed. But obviously she lost my sister. My sister was 9, so she lost a child.
9. Oh my god.
Yeah,
oh my god.
And so my mum is very part of the reason that, although I take the piss of her and say she's Kent's answer to Elizabeth Taylor, and she in many ways is, she knows that in a split second everything can change. And if you meet someone and that person makes you happy, why not?
Yeah.
And she doesn't regret anything.
Ben's mum was like that because, weirdly and completely coincidentally, Ben's dad died on the same day that Ben died.
Oh.
But 5 years apart, 4
Right.
years apart. And I remember being terrified about telling her because Ben was one of 6, but he was very much her golden child. And she said to me, you must, if you've met somebody that makes you feel good and happy, then you must. She says, I trust you. I trust your judgment. I trust your judgment with the children. And that was a really nice validation to have. And I'm very privileged and lucky to have that, because I know that not everybody does. But yeah, I think my parents described it as, when we first got together, they were worried that we were 2 lost souls kind of just clinging to a life raft together.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's what it was. I don't think either of us we were quite self-sufficient, both of us. John was he was still working at the time and looking after Holly, and I was, muddling through. And I don't necessarily think it was that we needed each other. I think it was just that we wanted each other.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big difference between those two things, between needing to be looked after and wanting to spend your life with someone.
But how do you say to people, and this is what's difficult, what I wanted to say was, no, I really fancy him. What I wanted to say was like, no, I'm having the best sex of my life. What I wanted to say was, no, we literally sit up talking till 3 a.m. and that's what I wanted to say. But you don't say stuff like that to people. So because you don't say stuff like that to people, people do assume, oh, she's just not very, she's never been on her own. So she just,
She's not coping very well, yeah.
she needed to find someone else. Or, when people would say, oh, it must be really difficult running a house by yourself. I'd be like, well, I run a school. I run a school with 1,500 children in it, and they're my responsibility. And I'm, safeguarding lead, and it's my job to call the policeman. I'm a really capable person. I just met someone that I really love.
I like to hang out with.
And I like to hang out with. And he was on his own with his daughter, and they were perfectly fine. They were absolutely great. So it's that kind of, I want to say, like, yes, it's better that we're together. Of course it is. But it's not like we both went, oh, I can't do this by myself. Or
who can I find? Who can I find?
Who can I find? Who can I find? This person I've been friends with for a long time. Because
and a relationship based on a friendship. I mean, mine and John's friendship was shorter, obviously, because we didn't know each other as long. But and because of the offshoot group of way that we're in, there was no secrets, and I entered into this relationship just like, this is who I am, and we've gone through my diagnosis together. We've gone through school changes. We've gone through battling with KCC for school placements. We've done it together as a team, and I've really enjoyed I've appreciated having somebody in my corner, and that was something I actually said to the kids in the car yesterday. We were talking about perfect and how there's no such thing as perfect. And sorry, this is one of my tangents. And I thought back, and I told the kids, because they like to hear little anecdotes about their dad. And I said, oh, years and years ago, we were at a party, and I had some friends that had done some weird course to I can't remember the details, and it was how to live a better life. And and I just remember Ben saying, she doesn't need to do that, she's perfect, and it's the things her imperfections that are what I love about her. And I still remember this, and this is way before we had kids. I don't even think we were married. And I just thought, when somebody sees you for who you genuinely are, instead of this facade that you've put up for so many years, it's special. It is special. And we both know that we're lucky to have found that again. Some people go their entire life without meeting one person that brings them the joy. And I think you grab onto the happiness. You grab onto all the happiness. I had all these plans. I was going to take the kids around the world. I was going to hire a tutor. This is when I thought I had a load of money in crypto, right? Yeah. And I didn't do that, but I did take them away on my own. I'm actually taking my eldest son away to Budapest for a couple of nights in December. Yeah, I think he's got to the age now where we can go and do sort of.
They become like a nice friend, don't they?
Do you know what? On holiday this year, we did Disney this year, which I'm still suffering with PTSD from it. But what I noticed was that my son he shares my humour.
Yeah.
And we were sort of like the naughty kids at dinner time. And it's quite fun to let that part of you come out again, isn't it? Because you lose that in all the grief and the admin and the, I don't know, just life, the grind of life. So
are your sons like Ben? As they get older, do you find yourself having conversation thinking, I'd be having this conversation with your dad?
Yeah, Monty, my eldest, so he's massive. He's like 6'2", and wow. I know, and he looks like his dad, and he's charismatic. His characteristics are like his dad, and he likes the same music. He sort of came across Oasis and Queen and stuff. So yeah, I do. I talk very openly about Ben to them, as we do about Sarah, because I feel that that's the best way for us to help them process their feelings. My younger son is very he's autistic, and he has just started to become quite obsessed with death again, which is really odd. So we're just sort of talking the fear of him dying, me dying, grandparents dying, and I think that is to do with the autism and not enabling him to perhaps process the grief in a like a neurotypical way, but he has just been accepted into a specialist school that works with children with trauma as well
Oh,
as
good. That's brilliant.
neurodiversity. So that was my battle with Casey.
Yeah.
But, actually, I say I battled with them, but to be fair, they fought my corner.
Oh, good.
Because they did. They in the end they fought my corner. I think I got into a room with the people, the decision makers, and I warned them, and they saw that I wasn't just this fussy mother that wanted a
Yeah.
special
Yeah.
extra
Yeah.
funding for my kid. But yeah, it's lovely watching them grow into young men. But also it comes with a tinge of sadness because he's flying. He academically he's great. He's a really nice kid, and I just wish sometimes that he
Oh,
could
I
see. And
get.
I'm like you. I don't believe in the afterlife. But all you can do is try and model the behaviour that you want them to replicate.
I think the only one of the few times I've always been quite stoic at work, and when I went back to work, I was very like, can everyone just not ask if I'm okay? I literally sent an email around saying I'm fine, just let me crack on.
That's interesting.
And I went. Well, we had parents' evening, as in the parents were coming to our school.
Yeah.
And because I'm deputy head, I didn't have any appointments. I was just kind of walking around and saying hello to people. And I saw all the mums and dads with the kids, and they'd like kid would walk in with a mum and a dad, and they'd sit down. And I burst into tears. So I was like, he will never have that. He will never have a mum and a dad that sit down, and I was so sad for him. And I had to go and just sit in my office and have a sob for half an hour.
That's made me go quite goosebumpy because I relate again. It's just little things like the first time Hector took part in the school play, he was sheep number 2, and I have never been more proud to see sheep number 2 come on the stage.
He stood
I
there
cried.
and he did it.
Yeah, and I cried because, and they're just not going to be there for all these big, wonderful events, and it is shit and it is unfair, but you can't let that pull you back down because you're still here. You're still going to go to their parents' evenings and weddings and pick them up pissed from parties. We're still going to do all that stuff.
And I think that's the thing. I think I'm over it now. But initially, I think when I first got together with Andy, it bothered me that he didn't love Reg the way that I do, because of course he doesn't. And I think it's slightly, I could be wrong, but I think it's harder for men. I think Matilda's just a little girl and I'm quite a maternal person, and it's quite easy, and I love her, and it's easy. But I think a teenage boy and a grown man, it's hard for them. The relationship is always going to be difficult.
He's never going to really accept him as a father figure. And we've noticed this. So Monty was, it was just for his 8th birthday when Ben died. So by the time I met John, he says it's softly catchy Monty. So it was just took Star Wars. And now actually he has he does have a father role for my children. He's been in their life so long, and Tabby has never known a different dad. So it is different. But when it comes to discipline, I would still take the lead probably from Monty. And John's more like his sort of confidant, I suppose. And they send each other stupid gifts and memes and things. But the other 3, I would say, I believe that he loves them. I don't know to say, do you love them as much as your biological child is not a question we would ever have. I consider all 4 of my children my children. And much like you, Holly was this 6-year-old that just had lost her mum, and so very quickly wanted the maternal side for me, and actually I loved being able to give it to her because she's pretty easy to love most of the time,
and that's the thing you get. But I think now Andy and Reg, they're out together right now, and they've gone for haircuts because we're going on holiday, and it's
we're going,
and they've Cyprus, which I'm very excited about. Our first little getting on a plane holiday. We've done lots of centre parks and all that kind of stuff, but it's exciting. And they went to see Robot Wars or Battle Robots or something on Saturday.
Boy stuff.
They do boy stuff, and it's nice. I think that, but I think it's harder because Matilda will say, I love you, and she all cuddles and stuff. Reg did say, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, he was going off to bed and he said, I love you both, as he went up the stairs, and then Andy and I were like, oh my God, that's so it's kind
such
of
a big
coming
thing,
and it's there. But I think it's just because Tilda has a mum, I guess. I think that's the other difference, is that Matilda has a mum, and 7 days out of 14 she's with her mum, and then we have her for 7 days and she goes back for 7 days. So she has a mum and Reg doesn't have a dad.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes I just feel rotten for him. I just think,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry you don't have a dad. I think it's brilliant he's got an Andy, but I think it's that thing of knowing that you know how you would throw yourself in front of a truck for your kid, and I funnily enough, I do think I would do that for Matilda, because I think I just think mums, if someone just says to you that's your kid, mums go okay, and we're kind of,
Here you come. Here's another one.
super. And I never wanted just to have one kid. I always wanted to have more, and Mike said no. So I'm like, great, I get this extra kid that I wanted.
Bonus baby,
hurrah. But I do think that's the thing that's difficult, is thinking I can't just magic you up your dad. And even though I can now look back and think maybe your dad wasn't the greatest of dads, some of the time, he was still your dad. And the older he gets and the more he's kind of like his dad sometimes, like, and I kind of I almost want to show him and be like, oh my God, your dad, and I try and talk about him as favorably as I can, at home all the time.
Yes.
Like, and daddy always used to say this, and, daddy used to hate it when mummy did this, and you're the same, and and kind of like jokey stuff like, oh, when your dad did, when we met, and all those kind of stories. It makes me sad for him that he can't see that. He's not got that kind of...
But also, and I am going to interject here, how big-hearted of you to, even though that your feelings had diminished, your romantic feelings, and you were able to see his faults and, subsequently realize it was a kind of coercive control almost type of relationship, but you are still able to share with your son the positives and the happiness and the little, and I think that is how you do it. You don't sit them down and have a really in-depth conversation about your dead dad. What you do is, as you're in the car, 'cause I love talking to him in the car because I can't escape, and you just drop into conversations. And sometimes, Monty gave me a hug the other day. I forgot about it, and I cried because it felt like being hugged by Ben.
Yeah.
It was really odd, and but then I think you don't want to put the pressure on them to be like their father, and I think it's very complicated growing up having lost a parent young. And I'm in the process of organising just like a 6-part offshoot of the podcast, talking to adults who lost a parent young.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
because one of the most common themes I have coming through is, will my kids be okay? How will my kids? Because I felt, shit, this is it. Like, their lives are fucked. Like, their dad died. Even Disney films, right?
Yeah.
And actually, what we have is I don't want to say, and I'm touching wood here, but we have 4 children who appear to be relatively unscathed. That's not to say that they aren't damaged in some way and they don't miss their dad, and that it isn't a terrible thing that happened, because of course it is, but they are probably going to be okay. And I spoke to a woman who runs a boutique in West Malling, Eves, and Terry, she said to me that I may get this the wrong way around, but one of her parents died suddenly, and the other one then took their own life.
Oh God!
And her and her brother got through that. So now you imagine that. So I think it will be quite reassuring and comforting in some ways for people to hear that children can endure unimaginable tragedy and loss, and they can still be okay.
I think there's a very good chance that you can also end up better.
Yeah, I think certainly more compassionate and kinder.
And also, just if my sister hadn't died, I wouldn't have done half of the things I did when I was younger. Made me so ambitious. I worked so hard, and I had been quite lazy, and I worked so hard, and I got a first for my degree. I've had 2 careers, one in the city, one as a teacher. I've done incredibly well at both, because I've always had this kind of ambition, and that ambition stems from knowing my parents only had me. And yes, that does make you a little bit screwed up in other ways, but I definitely turned that situation into a positive. I think that Reg is now at a private school because we did get some the pension money, and it meant I could give the older 2 children 50 grand each, and then I had 50 grand in a pot for Reg. And I'm using that to send him to private school where he is doing so well. And he was in this terrible school. He's gone to this new school. He's doing so well. He's like a different kid. He does
What year
rowing.
is he in?
Pardon?
What year is he?
10.
Year 10. Monty's year 9.
Yeah, so he was in year 9 when Mike died. But he's an August baby, so he's in year 10, but he's only just turned 14. But he's doing so well. And I feel like that school will be the making of him. He wouldn't have gone to that school had Mike not died, because whether there was money for it or not, which I would argue there was, Mike didn't agree with private school. So it's that kind of, I do think that we can, and I guess this is kind of where I see it, is that a terrible thing can happen, but the offshoot of it can be an enormously positive thing. I feel like things are better if you can at least kind of justify them in a way or think they happen for a reason. Losing my best friend is the worst thing to have happened. If I hadn't lost my best friend, I don't think I'd have come to the realization that Mike and I weren't right. And if I'd still believed that Mike and I were right when he died, I don't know what would have happened to me. Do you know what I mean? Every little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's like the butterfly wing.
Has ended up with how things are now. And how things are now is infinitely better. Even Reg said to me the other day, our life is so much better now. So to get to that, so I think it's so easy for us, particularly as parents, to look at our kids and think, oh God, you don't have a dad, this is awful, your whole life's going to be... But it doesn't have to be, because it can be that thing they look back on and say, do you know what? This terrible thing happened, but then these things happened, and that made me the brilliant person I am, not the screw up.
And also, most successful people come from a past of adversity. And yes, you don't wish this on anybody, but I genuinely think that my kids are...
No. Sorry, I've got people that have just walked in.
I think that you are a powerhouse. I think that you can hear this from... What was your sister's name, by the way?
Katie.
You can hear this, that losing somebody you loved at such a young age has given you this ambition and drive. And wow, what a life you've led. And the fact that you were subjected to this sudden traumatic loss, instead of allowing it to drag you down into a pit of despair, you've just used it to push yourself forward. And I don't know you, but I'm proud of you. So the people around you must be really, really proud of you. And when we come off mic, actually, I'm going to talk to you because I'm wondering whether we could introduce Monty and Reg at some point.
Yeah,
because
that'd be brilliant.
because we've moved around here. We can do this later. But thank you for sharing this story, because it is probably less uncommon than you think. And several of my guests have been in the process of separation, particularly men who have taken their own lives, actually. They have been in the process of separation, and it does mean the grief is very complicated. So hearing that you're not alone in it, and hearing that you don't feel like that horrible troll under the bridge that's like, well, why aren't I grieving like everybody else? You are giving a voice to many people, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time and being brave enough to do it.
Oh, thank you.
So I wish you all the best. I really do. I hope that your relationship blossoms. I hope Reg continues to fly, and I hope that we can meet for coffee, because we're really not that far away. So I like this. I'm building up like this little group of more widow friends. I like it. Widows are the best. So thank you once again. And for our listeners, John and I will discuss Jen's episode on Friday. So if you've got any questions for either us or for her, please do send them over the usual channels. Instagram is probably best. And take care of yourselves out there, okay? Lots of love.